Look at this screen and you tell me, what is a campaign? Now, I know that you can't speak because you're silenced, but I'm sure that everyone on this call will disagree on which of these activities is a campaign. And for me, there's a very, very easy answer as why this is so confusing. So let's take this example. We met Steve at Dream14. That's when we first came in contact. He recently clicked this link. So my content marketing person put a link for this webinar on LinkedIn. You can see the Google parameters here, the UTM source is LinkedIn, etc., etc. Signed up for today's webinar. Now, what campaign should Steve be associated to? Is it Dreamforce? Is it the LinkedIn of where he came from? Or is it the actual webinar? So there's a big difference between the source, which might be where someone originally came from, whether that's they first signed up for a webinar, they signed up for a demo, or we met them at an event and they were scanned, and traffic source. You know, the traffic source is where we come from. And often when we're talking about campaigns, we think, well, if we're doing all this stuff on LinkedIn or we're doing all this stuff on Twitter, well, that's the campaign. But it's actually not. It's not. The source, the content, the thing that got the person to come over and convert is actually, in most cases, the campaign. So, for example, we done an event last month. It was a great event, London's Calling. And this is what we want to see in our marketing ROI reports. So we spent so much, we met so many people, there were this many opportunities generated in the pipeline, and we won this much. Now, it's very easy for me to go back to my CEO next year and say, hey, we have to sponsor London Calling again. We got 10 times return on the revenue invested. Now, if we delve deeper into these responses, we could see that we generated 293 responses from the badge scanning system that cost $500. And we can see that we got 69 responses from the competition we run, where people left their business cards in a bowl. And we can also see that 5 business cards were acquired by the sales team. But we do not need to see that in our campaign. We roll the costs up. The sponsorship of the event wasn't 6,000, it might have been 4,000. And we might have spent money on banners, and we might have spent money on the scanning system and the competition prize. But actually, the whole event as a whole cost 6,000, and we just want to see the ROI on the whole spend of that event. Now, that's quite an easy example. When we go into something like today's webinar, it becomes slightly more complicated. So we've got the webinar. Again, this is what we want to see in our ROI reports in Salesforce. But when we add the source, we could say, well, first of all, we sent a newsletter that mentioned that we were doing this webinar today, and we've got 151 responses. And then we could say, well, we've done some CRM marketing, so that was 87 responses. And we've done some Twitter marketing, and that got 64 responses, and so on. But it's not helpful from a marketing ROI perspective to split out the source. We don't want to see this in Salesforce. I'm not saying that the source isn't important, but it's not helpful when we're trying to prove ROI in Salesforce. When we're doing source tracking, we need to use Google Analytics. The source is really important. We want to know where we're generating traffic from. I would encourage you all to set up goals and use UTM tracking for everything that you are doing, and use Google Analytics to see where the sources of traffic are coming from. But don't confuse this with campaigns. We can then look at conversion points. Now, it's worth saying that the conversion point is often the same as the campaign. But again, when we're looking in Salesforce, we don't need to know the granular detail of all the activities that happened during that campaign. We simply want to see this. So, just to summarize, the originating source of a person and campaigns are mutually exclusive. We may generate someone, they may originate from an event we've done 5 years ago, or they may originate from a webinar we've done 6 months ago, but they can still be members of a campaign. Now, it's really important for ongoing campaign ROI that this is what we look at. If we just take all the people that we met 5 years ago, if we did nothing, the likelihood is of them coming in and us closing some business with them is much, much lower than if we're active and we do webinars and we do white papers and we do lots of marketing activity to generate more interest and drive that person down the funnel. So we're not just looking at source, we are looking at individual campaigns and how they affect our revenues. Now, source is very, very important, but it doesn't need to be split out for ROI. And the only excluding area really for this is paid advertising like PPC, where the source and where the content and where the term is very, very important. And lastly, use Google Analytics and goals for source reporting and UTM track everything. It really, really is important. And when I come on in a second to Pardot, the way Pardot interacts with Google Analytics is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to move on now to Pardot campaigns and Salesforce campaigns, which are very, very different.